The fist hit steel. Once, twice, again. Small knuckles against a door that had been built to keep the world out. The sound echoed across the empty parking lot, sharp and rhythmic, the kind of sound that does not belong at 3 in the morning. The boy did not stop. His hand was already bleeding red smears across the cold metal, but he kept hitting. Harder now, faster. Like the door was the only thing standing between him and the end of the world. Inside chairs scraped. Boots hit concrete. Voices dropped low. Someone swore. A deadbolt turned loud and metallic, and the door cracked open 3 inches. A chain pulled tight across the gap. One eye looked down, then 2, then 3 men, all of them staring at the small figure on the step. A child, barefoot, shaking in the November cold, no older than 8. He held a flashlight in his right hand, gripped so tight his fingers had gone white, but the light was dead. The batteries had died somewhere on the long walk here. The boy looked up at the men with eyes that did not blink and did not look away. He was afraid. That much was clear. But he was not leaving. The man who opened the door was called Crank. He was big. Not gym big. Work big. The kind of size that comes from 30 years of lifting engine blocks and swinging tools in the heat. His hands were scarred and thick. His beard was gray and hit his chest. He had been president of this chapter of the Iron Serpents for 11 years and a member for 26. He had seen things that would break most men. He had done things that kept him awake some nights. But when he looked down at this boy standing barefoot on his doorstep at 3 in the morning with blood on his hands, something shifted in his chest. Something old and buried. He did not show it. He never showed anything. But it was there. Behind Crank stood Diesel, the sergeant-at-arms, shorter, thicker, built like a man who had been in too many fights to bother counting. His hand was already on the pistol tucked into his waistband. This did not make sense. A kid showing up here at this hour, alone, bleeding. It smelled wrong. It smelled like law enforcement running a sting, or worse, a rival club using a child to get that door open so they could put bullets through it. "Where'd you come from?" Crank's voice was low-controlled. The boy pointed behind him, past the lot, past the chain-link fence, toward the 2-lane road that ran north into farmland and irrigation ditches and nothing else for miles. "Who brought you here?" "Nobody. I walked." Diesel shook his head. "No way. Nearest house is 4 miles out." But the boy's feet told the story. Black on the bottom, cut deep in places, gravel embedded in the skin, dirt caked between the toes. He had walked, barefoot, in the cold. There was no faking that. "My sister," the boy said. His voice cracked but did not break. "She's in the trunk of a car. Please." Crank looked at Diesel. Diesel looked at the 2 men behind him. Marcus, tall and lean with a scar across his jaw. Poco, wide and quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. Because every man in that room understood what was being asked. And every man in that room had reasons to shut the door and walk away. They had warrants. They had products stashed in the back. They had guns that were not registered and money that was not clean. Letting a child into this building was a risk they did not need. Following that child into the dark was worse. Could be a trap. Could be a wire. Could be the beginning of the end. But Crank grabbed his jacket off the back of a chair. He zipped it up slow. Looked at Diesel. "Show me." The boy turned and walked. Crank, Diesel, and Marcus followed. Poco stayed behind to watch the door. The kid moved fast for someone his size. Faster than you would think a boy with torn-up feet could manage. He did not talk. He did not look back. He just moved. Across the lot. Through a gap in the chain-link fence where someone had bent the wire back years ago. Down a gravel shoulder and onto the road. It was cold. Not freezing, but close. That valley cold that sits in your chest and does not leave. The boy wore a thin t-shirt and pajama pants. No jacket, no socks, no shoes. And he was walking like none of it mattered. Like his body had decided the cold was not important and shut it off. Crank watched the kid and said nothing, but he walked a little faster. Nobody talked. The only sound was boots on gravel and the boy's bare feet slapping cold pavement. Diesel kept his head on a swivel, checking the tree line, the ditches, the dark shapes of farm equipment parked in the fields. Marcus hung back 10 paces, watching behind them. If this was an ambush, this was exactly how it would work. Lead them into the dark. Spread them out. Hit them from the sides. Every man out there knew it, and every man kept walking anyway. About a quarter mile down the road, the boy stopped. He pointed to the right. A sedan sat nose down in an irrigation ditch, tilted at a hard angle, the rear end sticking up toward the road. Headlights off, engine off. No sound at all except the wind cutting through dead crops in the fields. Diesel pulled his gun and moved left. Marcus circled wide to the right. Crank walked straight to the car, slow and steady. He put his hand flat on the trunk. It was warm. The engine had been running not long ago. "She's in there," the boy said. He stood on the road, hugging himself against the cold. He put her in there. Crank tried the trunk release. Locked. He looked at the boy. Keys. He took them. Crank did not wait. He pulled a pry bar from the inside pocket of his jacket, the kind of tool a man carries when he expects certain kinds of problems. Jammed it into the trunk seam and wrenched it open with one hard pull. The metal screamed and gave. The trunk popped up. Inside, curled into a ball on a dirty blanket, was a girl. Small, maybe 5 years old. Her wrists were bound with silver duct tape. Her mouth was taped shut. Her eyes were open, wide, terrified, locked onto the first face she saw. Crank froze just for a second. 1 second where his whole body stopped moving. Then he reached in. He pulled a knife from his belt and cut the tape from her wrists. Carefully, slowly, the kind of careful you would not expect from hands that big. He peeled the tape from her mouth and she gasped for air like she had been underwater. Then she started to cry. Not loud, not screaming, just this thin, shaking sound that came from somewhere deep in her chest. The boy scrambled up onto the bumper and reached for her. "Lily, it's me. I'm here. It's Danny." The girl grabbed her brother and buried her face in his neck and did not let go. Danny held her with both arms. He was shaking now. Not from the cold. He was shaking because he had done what he came to do, and his body was finally letting go of everything it had been carrying. He was 8 years old, and for the last hour and a half, he had been the only person standing between his sister and whatever was going to happen to her. That weight had kept him moving. Now it hit him all at once. Marcus had already cleared the front of the car. Nobody inside. But on the passenger seat, he found a wallet, a cell phone with a cracked screen, and a vehicle registration folded into the glove box. He unfolded it under the light from Diesel's phone. Read the name, read it again. Then he walked it over to Crank without a word and held it where Crank could see. The registration belonged to Raymond Devlin. Something changed in Crank's face. Not shock, not fear. Something colder than both. Because Raymond Devlin was a name that had not been spoken inside that clubhouse in over 6 years. Devlin had been a connect, a middleman who moved product between the club and buyers up north. He had been trusted. He had eaten at that table. He had shaken Crank's hand more times than either of them could count. And then one day he vanished, along with $80,000 of the club's money. Most of the members believed he was dead. A few believed the club had made him dead, but nobody talked about it. Not ever. It was a closed file, sealed shut with silence, and the understanding that some names just do not get said anymore. And now his car was in a ditch with a child locked in the trunk. Crank folded the registration and put it in his pocket. He picked Lily up off the bumper. She weighed nothing. She held on to his jacket with both fists and pressed her face into his shoulder. Danny walked beside him, close enough that his arm brushed against Crank's leg with every step. Nobody said a word on the walk back. Inside the clubhouse, they wrapped Lily in a wool blanket from the storage closet. Someone heated water for tea. Someone else found a box of crackers in the kitchen and a jar of peanut butter with a bent lid. Lily stopped crying. She sat on the old couch in the corner with Danny's arm around her, and slowly, one breath at a time, her shaking stopped. Danny's eyes started to get heavy. The room got quiet. A few of the men sat down. Diesel leaned against the wall and holstered his gun for the first time since the boy knocked. For a few minutes sitting there in the dim light of that clubhouse, it felt like the worst part was over. The kids were safe, the girl was breathing. Whatever had happened out there on that road was behind them now. That feeling lasted about 4 minutes. Danny's eyes opened. He looked across the room at Crank, who was standing by the front door with his arms folded. And in a voice so flat and steady, it did not sound like it belonged to a child, he said, "He told me he's coming back for her. He knows I came here." The room went dead still. He said, "If I told anyone, he'd kill our mom. He said he knows where she is, and he'll do it." Diesel straightened off the wall. Who, who said that? The man. The one who put her in the trunk. He let me out of the car. He wanted me to run. He said it was a game. He said I had 1 hour. Danny's voice cracked for the first time. But it's not a game. Crank walked over to the couch. He crouched down in front of Danny, eye level. "What's your name, son?" "Danny Morrow." "Where's your mom, Danny?" "I don't know. He took her 3 days ago. We were at home and he came in and he took her. He said if we told anyone, he would hurt her. He locked us in the basement." Danny stopped. His lip trembled. "She had a phone before he took it. She called me, just for a second. She said if something bad happened, I should find the men with the motorcycles. The ones on the road outside town. She said they were the only ones who could help." Crank's jaw tightened. So Sandra Morrow had known about the club, had known enough to tell her son where to go when everything fell apart. That changed things. That meant she was not just a random victim. She was connected to this somehow. "Then tonight he came back," Danny continued. "He took Lily. He put her in the trunk. He told me to run. He said I had 1 hour to find help or he would come back and take her somewhere I would never find her." "Why did you come here?" "Because my mom told me to. She said you were dangerous, but I thought dangerous men could help." Crank stayed crouched there for a long moment, looking at this boy who had walked 4 miles barefoot in the dark because his mother had bet everything on the idea that criminals might have more honor than the law. Then he stood. He turned to the others. "Diesel, check the car. Everything. Glove box under the seats, trunk. Bring it all back here." Diesel left. Crank walked to the table and sat down heavy. He folded his hands in front of him and stared at nothing. Because he understood now. This was not a rescue. This was something else. This was a message. 15 minutes later, Diesel came back. He was carrying a canvas bag. He dumped it on the table and what spilled out changed everything. Photographs, dozens of them, printed on glossy paper, high resolution, professional, and every single one of them was a weapon. A judge shaking hands with a pride in a leather vest outside a warehouse. A police sergeant standing next to a truck with a broken tail light, no ticket being written in an envelope visible in his hand. 2 city council members at a fundraiser dinner seated at a table with men who had no business being near elected officials. And 3 photographs of men who were sitting at this table right now. Iron serpents. Crank himself in one photo standing next to a man in a suit outside a shipping facility. The date on the back was 7 years old. Diesel kept pulling things out of the bag. Bank statements, photocopied documents, ledgers, handwritten notes, dates, amounts, names. It was all there. Years of it. Every handshake, every envelope of cash, every deal that had ever been made in the shadows. Documented, organized, filed. Devlin had not just stolen the money 6 years ago and disappeared. He had been building something. A weapon made of paper and ink. He had documented everything he had ever seen. And tucked into the bottom of the bag in a manila folder with a red tab was a sheet of paper with a name typed at the top. Sandra Morrow. Crank opened the folder. Inside were bank records, tax forms, a photocopy of a driver's license, and a handwritten note in Devlin's handwriting that said, "Bookkeeper, knows the numbers, confirms everything. Do not lose her." Diesel read over Crank's shoulder. "The mother. She worked for him," Crank said quietly. "She knew what he was doing. She helped him build this. Then she's not just leverage. She's proof. If these files go to a prosecutor, she's the one who can say it's all real." Crank closed the folder. He looked at the photographs spread across the table. Every man in this room knew what they were looking at. This was not evidence. This was a man. Devlin was holding the fuse. "Call the others," Crank said. "Everyone, now." Within 30 minutes, 8 more men arrived, some from houses nearby, some riding 20 miles through cold, dark roads. Nobody asked why. When Crank called at that hour, you came, no questions. Crank laid it out plain. Devlin was alive. Devlin had files that could bury them all. Devlin had taken a woman and used her children to deliver a message. And Devlin was coming back. Marcus spoke first. He was the pragmatist, always had been. "Burn the files, dump the car in the canal, drop the kids at a hospital and say we found them on the road. We were never here, none of this happened." Diesel shook his head. "And when Devlin shows up and we have got nothing, he still has copies. You know he does. A man like that does not keep one set." "Then we find him first. With what a name we have not heard in 6 years in a car in a ditch." The table went quiet again. A prospect named Buckley, barely 22, spoke up from the back. "Why don't we just call the cops?" Every head turned. Nobody answered him. Nobody had to. Half the law enforcement in the county was in those photographs. Calling the police meant handing evidence to the people it was about. Marcus circled back to the simplest play. Forget Devlin. Forget the files. Protect the club. Drop the kids somewhere safe and disappear from this entire situation. That is the smart move. It was the smart move. Every man in the room knew it. Walk away, let the mess sort itself out. Let Sandra Morrow be someone else's tragedy. Protect the club. That was the code. That was always the code. But Crank did not move. He sat at the head of the table looking at the closed door behind which 2 children were sleeping on a couch. And he thought about something he had not let himself think about in 10 years. His son, Michael, 7 years old, brown hair, gap-toothed smile. A kid who loved dinosaurs and hated broccoli and could not tie his shoes without getting the loops backward. It had been a Tuesday, middle of summer. Crank had been on a run, 3-day job moving product across state lines. Good money. The kind of money that kept the lights on and the mortgage paid. Michael had asked him not to go, had stood in the doorway with his stuffed T-Rex tucked under one arm and said, "Can you stay home this time, Dad?" And Crank had said no. He had said he had to work. He had said he would be back soon. He had kissed the top of his son's head and walked out the door. Michael had been hit by a car 2 days later, crossing the street to the park. The driver did not see him. By the time Crank got the call and made it to the hospital, his son was already gone. His wife left 6 months after that. She did not blame him out loud. She did not have to. The silence said everything. Crank had not been there. He had been doing club business, and Michael had died alone. Crank buried that grief so deep he convinced himself it was gone. He threw himself into the club, into the work, into the life. He became president because it gave him something to do with the anger. And for 10 years, he had told himself he was fine. But sitting at that table, looking at those photographs, listening to men talk about abandoning 2 children, because it was the smart move, he realized something. He was not fine. He had never been fine. He had been running. And now, for the first time in a decade, he had a chance to stop. A chance to do the thing he should have done 10 years ago. Be there. Crank stood up. He looked around the table. That boy walked 4 miles in the dark and with no shoes to knock on our door. He did not go to a gas station. He did not flag down a car. He came here He picked us. He paused. Let that sit. We're not dumping those kids. Nobody argued, not even Marcus, because they all saw it. The shift, the decision. Crank had made up his mind. And when Crank made up his mind, the club followed. They set the clubhouse up tight. Diesel and two others took positions covering the parking lot and the road. Marcus went to the roof with a rifle and a pair of binoculars. Poco watched the back. Crank stayed inside with the children. Before he took his position, Crank walked to the bathroom, ran cold water over his face, looked at himself in the cracked mirror above the sink. He looked old, tired, used up. But something else was there too, something he had not seen in years. Purpose. He dried his face with a rough towel and walked back out. Danny was still awake on the couch. Lily had fallen asleep against his shoulder. The boy looked up when Crank approached. "You should rest," Crank said. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I fall asleep, something bad might happen, and I won't be able to stop it." Crank sat down in the chair across from the couch. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You did your part, Danny. You got your sister here. You got help. Now let us do the rest." "What if he comes back?" "Then we'll handle it." "You promise?" Crank looked at this 8-year-old boy who had carried more weight tonight than most grown men carry in a lifetime. And he made a promise he intended to keep. "I promise." Danny nodded. His eyes started to close. Within 2 minutes, he was asleep. Crank stood. He walked to the storage closet and found an old wool blanket, spread it over both kids. Then he noticed Danny's feet, still bare, still bandaged with rough gauze and tape that Diesel had applied an hour ago. The kids' toes were already turning blue from the cold. Crank walked to his locker in the back room, opened it. Inside was a pair of thick wool socks, the kind he wore on long winter rides. He pulled them out, walked back to the couch, and carefully, without waking the boy, he rolled the socks onto Danny's feet. They were way too big. He folded them down at the ankles so they would stay on. Then he stood there for a moment, looking at these two kids who had walked into his life 3 hours ago and changed everything. And he thought about Michael, about the socks he used to put on his son's feet when they got cold, about the bedtime stories, about all the small moments he had taken for granted until they were gone. "I'm here this time," he whispered, to Michael, to himself, to whatever God might be listening. "I'm here." The lights went low, and they waited. It was just past 4:30 in the morning when headlights appeared on the 2-lane road. Moving slow, a dark pickup truck. It pulled onto the shoulder about 200 yards from the clubhouse and sat there, engine running. Then the lights cut off. 2 men got out from the passenger side, then a third from the driver's seat. The third one was tall, thin. He moved with the kind of easy confidence that belongs to a man who has been in control of things for a long time and expects to stay that way. Even from 200 yards, Crank recognized the walk. Devlin. He approached the gate on foot, unhurried, hands in his jacket pockets. The other two stayed by the truck. One of them was big. The other carried something close to his hip that caught the light for half a second. Marcus on the roof tracked them through the binoculars and whispered into a radio. 2 at the truck, 1 armed, main target at the fence. Devlin stopped at the chain link and raised his voice, not shouting, just loud enough to carry. "Crank, I know you're in there. I know you've got my property." Crank stepped through the front door, alone. He walked across the lot slow and stopped 6 feet from the fence. 6 feet from a man he had not seen in 6 years and had believed was in the ground. "Those kids aren't your property, Ray." Devlin smiled, thin, cold. "Everything in that car is my property. The girl, the documents, the phone, all of it. You know how this works?" "The girl is 5 years old." "The girl is a message, same as the boy, same as the mother. You think I left them by accident? I wanted you to find them. I wanted you to see those files because now you know what I have. And now we negotiate." Crank said nothing. He just looked at the man standing on the other side of the fence. A man he had trusted once. A man he had called a friend, and he felt nothing. No anger, no betrayal, just a cold, empty certainty about what was going to happen next. Where's their mother, Ray? She's safe for now. You'll get her back when I'm across state lines. That's not good enough. It's the only answer you're getting until we have a deal. What kind of deal? Devlin laid it out. Clean, simple. He wanted $50,000 in cash. He wanted the club's protection for 48 hours. He wanted safe passage out of the state. And in exchange, he would hand over every copy of the files and disappear. Again. For good. He would vanish like he did before, and the files would vanish with him. It was a clean offer. A cold one, but clean. The kind of deal that men like this make in the dark and never speak of again. Crank stood there for a long time. Long enough that Devlin shifted his weight. Long enough that the two men by the truck looked at each other. The wind picked up. Somewhere behind the club, a dog barked once and went quiet. Then Crank said something that Devlin did not expect. You know what the difference is between you and me, Ray? Devlin's smile faded. What? I know what I am. I know I've done bad things. I know there's a reckoning coming for me. But I never used kids. I never put a 5-year-old girl in a trunk and taped her mouth shut. I never sent an 8-year-old boy walking barefoot through the dark because I needed leverage. Spare me the moral superiority, Crank. You're a criminal, same as me. No, we're not the same, and I'm going to prove it. Crank pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, put it on speaker, and when the voice on the other end answered, tired and confused, he said, "It's Crank. I've got something for you. Everything. Names, dates, photographs, account numbers. All of it. Everything you asked me for 2 years ago. And I've got the man who built it standing in front of me right now." The person on the other end of that call was a journalist named Elena Foster. She had been investigating county corruption for years. She had approached the club twice before. Twice she had been turned away. But Crank had kept her number saved in his phone, and now he was using it. Devlin's face went white because he understood instantly what had happened. The files were his weapon, his leverage, his only protection, and Crank had just handed them to someone who was going to publish them for the entire world to see, which meant Devlin could not threaten anyone with exposure anymore. The exposure was already happening. The weapon was spent, and without it, Raymond Devlin was just a man standing in a cold parking lot with 2 hired guns and nothing left to bargain with. "You just destroyed yourself," Devlin said. His voice had changed. It was thin now, shaking. "You're in those files too. I know exactly what's in those files, Ray. And I know what I did. But that girl in there is 5. And her brother walked through the dark to find her. And their mother is out there somewhere because of you. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me where Sandra is right now, or these men are going to do what they've wanted to do since they cut the tape off that little girl's wrists." Devlin looked at the serpents, at the guns, at the faces of men who were not bluffing and not negotiating and not interested in anything he had to offer anymore. And for the first time all night, the control left his body. His shoulders dropped. His hands opened at his sides. He looked like what he was, a man who had run out of moves. "Storage unit, off Route 9, Unit 41, she's alive." Diesel was moving before Devlin finished the sentence. He took Marcus and one of the prospects, and they drove. 16 minutes later, Diesel called. "We got her. She's breathing, scared as hell, but breathing." Crank closed his eyes for a moment, exhaled. "Bring her back." Devlin and his 2 men were held at the clubhouse under guard. Hands zip-tied, seated on the concrete floor in the corner. Crank called the state police, not the county sheriff. Half the county department was in those files. He called the state troopers directly, gave them the address, told them what they would find. They took Devlin into custody just as the first gray light of morning crept over the ridge at the edge of the valley. Elena Foster arrived 20 minutes after the state troopers. She came alone, drove a 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the rear fender and a recorder in the center console that was already running when she stepped out of the car. She was in her late 30s, lean, sharp-eyed. The kind of woman who had spent years learning how to walk into rooms where she was not wanted and ask questions nobody wanted to answer. She had worked county crime beats for a decade, had written exposés on kickback schemes and zoning fraud and campaign finance violations that got buried on page 6 because the people she was writing about owned the papers. 2 years ago, she had approached the Iron Serpents, showed up at the clubhouse in broad daylight with a notebook and a list of names, told Crank she knew the club was involved in things that connected to the corruption she was investigating, told him she was not interested in taking them down. She was interested in the truth, and if he ever wanted to talk, she would listen. Crank had walked her to her car and told her never to come back. But he kept her card, tucked it into his wallet behind a photo of Michael that he had not looked at in years. And now standing in the parking lot as the sun came up, he handed her the canvas bag. She sat at the wooden table where the files were still spread out. She looked at every page. She photographed every document. She asked questions and Crank answered them. All of them. Honestly, without a lawyer, without conditions. Why now? She asked. You've been sitting on this for years. Why call me tonight? Crank looked at the closed door, at the couch where Danny and Lily were still asleep, because I got tired of being the kind of man who walks away. Elena nodded. She did not press. She just kept recording. When she asked him if he understood what this meant for him personally, he said, I've understood that since about 4 this morning. She recorded for 2 hours straight. Diesel brought coffee, black, strong, the kind that tastes like motor oil but keeps you awake. Elena drank it without complaint. When she was done, she packed up her equipment and stood. She looked at Crank for a long moment. Then she said, thank you. He did not respond, just watched her walk to her car and drive away. Inside the clubhouse, Danny was awake. He sat on the edge of the couch with his sister still asleep beside him. His feet were clean now. Someone had washed them, bandaged them with gauze and medical tape from a first aid kit someone had dug out of a closet, and someone had put socks on him. Not his socks, men's socks, thick wool ones, way too big, rolled down and folded over at the ankle so they would stay on his small feet. A half-empty mug of hot chocolate sat on the floor beside him. Nobody in the club said who did that. Not one of them claimed it. It was not the kind of thing these men talked about. Crank walked over and sat down next to Danny. The boy looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone his age. Your mom's safe, Crank said. My guys found her. She's at the hospital. They're taking care of her. You'll see her soon. Danny nodded. He did not cry. He just nodded, like he had been holding on so long that even good news could not break through the wall he had built. You did good, kid. You saved your sister. I was scared. I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is. Danny looked down at his bandaged feet, at the socks that were 3 sizes too big. Are you going to be okay? Crank smiled, small, sad. I don't know, but I did the right thing, and that's enough. The state troopers came back inside. They wanted to talk to Danny, to get his statement, to understand what had happened. Crank stood and walked to the other side of the room, gave them space. Diesel came over and stood next to him. You know what's coming, right? Yeah. Prosecutors are going to go through those files. They're going to find your name. They're going to charge you. I know. You could still run. We could get you out of the state before they move. Crank shook his head. No, I'm done running. Diesel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you're a better man than most of us, Crank. I'm really not. Yeah, you are. Outside, the sky was turning from black to gray to the pale blue of early morning. The temperature was rising, the valley cold was lifting, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed. Inside the clubhouse, 2 children waited to see their mother, and a man who had spent 10 years running from his past finally stopped. Sandra Mora was reunited with her children at the hospital that same morning. Diesel and Marcus brought her in. She was dehydrated, shaking. Her wrists were raw from the zip ties. But when she walked into the room where Danny and Lily were waiting, all of that fell away. She stopped in the doorway. Just stopped, like seeing them alive was something her brain could not process yet. Danny stood up, Lily ran to her, and Sandra dropped to her knees and pulled them both into her arms and held them so tight it hurt. She did not speak. She just held them and cried. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it has no words. A nurse tried to check her vitals. Sandra waved her away. Not yet. Not now. Right now, she needed to hold her children and remember what it felt like to breathe. Later, when the investigators asked her how Danny had known to go to the clubhouse, she told them the truth. I told him 3 days ago when Devlin first took me. He let me make one phone call, said it was to prove I was alive. I called Danny. I had 30 seconds. I told him if anything happened, if things got worse, he should find the men with the motorcycles, the Iron Serpents. I told him they were the only ones who could help. The investigator wrote it down. Why them go on? Because I knew them. I worked for Devlin. I kept his books. I knew what he was documenting. And I knew the serpents were in it. I also knew they were the kind of men who would not let a child suffer. Whatever else they were, they had a code. You were right. I was desperate. But yes, I was right. Danny, when they asked him the same question later, said, my mom told me to find them. She said they were dangerous, but I thought dangerous men could help. The investigator left that part out of the official report. Some things do not fit into paperwork. 3 days later, the story broke. Front page of the county paper. Lead segment on 2 evening newscasts. Elena Foster's byline on every piece. The photographs, the documents, the names, all of it. Out in the open. Undeniable. The headlines were brutal. County corruption ring exposed judges, police officials named in bribery scheme. Biker gang leader turns over evidence in sweeping corruption case. 2 children at center of dramatic rescue lead to corruption indictments. Within a week, 14 people were indicted. 2 judges, 5 law enforcement officers, 3 county officials, and 4 members of the Iron Serpents, including Crank. The charges were racketeering and conspiracy, federal, the kind of charges that do not go away, the kind that come with real time. Crank did not fight it. He did not hire a high-priced lawyer. He did not cooperate against anyone else in the club. He just pled guilty, took what was coming, and waited for sentencing. The other serpents who were charged took plea deals, testified against the judges and the cops, got reduced sentences in exchange for cooperation. Crank did not judge them for it. Every man makes his own choices. Every man pays his own price. The club fell apart after that. Half the members scattered. A few went to ground. The ones who were not indicted tried to hold things together, but it was over. The chapter was done. Within a year, the federal government moved in with a larger sweep. The clubhouse was seized, sold at auction. It became a tire shop. But before all of that, before the sentencing, before the collapse, there was one night that nobody talks about. Crank was out on bail, waiting for his court date. He went back to the clubhouse one last time. It was empty. Most of the guys had already moved on. The lights were off. The place smelled like stale beer and motor oil and decades of history that was about to be erased. He sat at the table where the files had been spread out, where he had made the call that ended everything. And he thought about Michael. He thought about the last time he had seen his son, the way Michael had looked at him in the doorway, the way he had asked him to stay, and the way Crank had said no. He had spent 10 years telling himself that Michael's death was not his fault, that he could not have known, that he was just trying to provide for his family. But sitting there in the dark alone, he finally let himself admit the truth. He had chosen the club over his son. He had chosen the work over being there, and Michael had paid the price. But this time with Danny and Lily, he had chosen differently. He had chosen to be there, to do the right thing, even though it cost him everything. And for the first time in 10 years, Crank felt something close to peace. He pulled a pen from his pocket, found a scrap of paper on the table, and he started writing. It was a letter to Michael, The letter he should have written a decade ago. He wrote about the mistakes he had made, about the things he wished he could take back, about the man he had been and the man he wished he had been. He wrote about Danny, about the choice he had made, about how saving those kids did not bring Michael back, but it gave him something he thought he had lost forever, a chance to be the kind of father Michael deserved. He wrote for an hour. When he was done, he folded the letter and put it in his jacket pocket. He never sent it. There was no one to send it to. But writing it was enough. 2 weeks later, Crank stood in front of a federal judge and listened to the sentence. 14 months in a federal facility. Minimum security. He served it quietly, kept his head down, did not cause trouble, did not ask for favors. The facility was in the southern part of the state. Low concrete buildings surrounded by double fences. Not a prison exactly, more like a punishment with better lighting. Most of the men there were white-collar criminals, tax fraud, embezzlement, corporate malfeasance. Crank was one of the few who looked like he belonged behind a fence. He got a job in the workshop, fixing equipment, rebuilding engines, the kind of work he had done his whole life. It gave him something to do with his hands, something to focus on besides the time. At night, he lay on his bunk and thought about the kids, about Danny's bare feet on the cold concrete, about Lily's wide, terrified eyes when the trunk opened, about Sandra's voice on the phone when she called 2 weeks into his sentence. She had found his number somehow, called the prison, left a message. Thank you. I don't know what else to say. Just thank you. Crank listened to that message 3 times, then he deleted it. Not because he did not care, but because hearing it again would break something inside him that he needed to keep intact. He thought about Elena Foster, about the stories she had written, about the people who had been brought down because of it. 2 judges removed from the bench, 3 police officers fired and indicted, a city council member who resigned in disgrace. He did not regret it, not for a second. And he thought about Michael, about the letter he had written in the clubhouse, about the things he had never said when his son was alive, about the weight of carrying that silence for 10 years. In prison, Crank started writing again. Not letters this time, just thoughts, memories, the kind of things a man writes when he has time to think and nothing to lose. He filled 3 notebooks over the course of 14 months, never showed them to anyone, just wrote them and put them away. When he got out, he did not return to the Iron Serpents. There was nothing to return to. The chapter was gone. The men had scattered. The life he had known for 26 years had ended. He moved to a small town 2 states over, got a job at a machine shop, rented a 1-bedroom apartment above a diner, lived quietly, kept to himself. The owner of the shop knew his background, hired him anyway, said everyone deserves a second chance. Crank worked hard, showed up early, stayed late, did not complain. After 6 months, the owner gave him a raise. After a year, he gave him the keys to the shop, said he trusted him. Trust. It was a strange thing to have again after so long without it. Crank lived like that for a while, quiet, alone. He did not ride much anymore. The bike sat in the garage under a tarp. Some days he thought about selling it, but he never did. It was a connection to something, to a version of himself that was gone but not forgotten. Once a year on the anniversary of that night, he got on his bike and rode back. Back to the valley, back to the building that used to be the clubhouse. He would pull into the parking lot, engine off, and he would sit there, looking at the place where everything changed. The people who worked there had no idea who he was. They just saw a big man on an old Harley sitting quietly in the lot, and then he would start the bike and leave. One year on that ride back, Crank stopped at a cemetery about 30 miles outside the valley. He had not been there in over a decade, but he knew exactly where to go. Michael's grave was in the southeast corner, under a tree by Kandarmi. The headstone was small, simple, just his name and the dates. The grass around it was overgrown. Nobody had been here in a long time. Crank stood there for a while, just looking. Then he pulled the letter from his jacket, the one he had written in the clubhouse the night before he went to prison, the one he had carried with him for 3 years, and he read it out loud. His voice cracked in places. He had to stop and breathe, but he got through it. When he was done, he folded it up and placed it on the grave, weighted it down with a rock so the wind would not take it. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said quietly, "but I'm trying to be better. I hope that counts for something." He stood there a while longer, then he got back on his bike and rode away. 5 years after that night in November, Crank got a phone call. Unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. "Is this Crank?" A woman's voice. Familiar but distant. "Yeah, who's this?" "It's Sandra. Sandra Morrow." Crank sat down. He had not heard her voice since the hospital, since the morning after. "How'd you get this number?" "I have my ways. Listen, I know this is out of the blue, but there's something I need to tell you, okay? Danny's been asking about you. He's 13 now, and he remembers that night. He remembers what you did, and he wants to meet you, if you're willing." Crank was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I'm not the kind of man a kid should look up to. You saved his life. You saved my daughter's life. You gave up everything to do it. I'd say that makes you exactly the kind of man he should know." "Where are you now?" "We moved 3 states over, started fresh, but we're coming back next month. Danny graduates middle school. We'll be in the area for a few days. I thought maybe we could meet, all of us, just for coffee or something, no pressure." Crank thought about Danny's bare feet, about the socks he had rolled onto them while the boy slept, about the weight of that moment and the years that had passed since. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'd like that." They met 3 weeks later at a diner halfway between where they both lived, neutral ground. Sandra brought Danny and Lily. Crank came alone. Danny had grown. He was 13 now, taller, broader in the shoulders. But when he saw Crank, something in his face shifted. Recognition. Memory. He walked over and stopped a few feet away. "I remember you," Danny said. "I remember you too. You gave me socks." Crank smiled, small, honest. "Yeah, I did. I still have them. You don't have to keep them." "I know, but I want to." Sandra stepped forward. She looked at Crank, at this man who had changed everything. And she said the thing she had been holding on to for 5 years. "You saved my children, and I never got to say thank you face to face. So I'm saying it now. Thank you." Crank shook his head. "Your son saved his sister. I just helped. You did more than help. You gave up everything, your freedom, your life. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" Crank looked at Danny, at this boy who had walked through the dark because he believed dangerous men could help. And he said, "Because I have a son, had a son, and I wasn't there when he needed me. So when your boy showed up at my door, I decided I wasn't going to make that mistake again." Sandra's eyes filled. "I'm sorry about your son." "Me too." They sat in the diner for 2 hours, talking, sharing pieces of the last 5 years. Crank told him about the machine shop, about the quiet life, about the apartment above the diner and the bike in the garage. Sandra told him about the move, about starting over, about how hard it had been and how good it felt to finally be safe. Danny listened. He did not say much, but when they were getting ready to leave, he walked over to Crank and held out his hand. Crank shook it. "Thank you," Danny said, "for being there." "You're welcome, kid." Lily, who had been quiet the whole time, came over too. She was 10 now, bright-eyed, confident. Nothing like the terrified 5-year-old in the trunk. She looked up at Crank and said, "I don't remember that night, but Danny told me what you did, and I wanted to say thank you too." Crank crouched down to her level. "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart. I'm just glad you're okay." "I am, because of you." She hugged him. Quick, unexpected. Then stepped back and took her mother's hand. After they left, Crank sat in the diner for a long time, watching the sun go down through the window, thinking about Michael, about the choices he had made, about the life he had lived and the life he was living now. He pulled out his phone, looked at the photos Sandra had sent him before they met. Danny and Lily and Sandra, smiling, safe, alive. He saved it, right next to the photo of Michael he still carried in his wallet. 2 years later, Crank got another call. It was Danny. He was 15 now, about to start high school. He wanted to invite Crank to his 8th grade graduation. Crank drove 6 hours to be there. Sat in the back row, watched Danny walk across the stage. Watched him shake hands with the principal. Watched him smile. After the ceremony, Danny found him in the crowd, introduced him to his friends. "This is Crank. He's a friend of the family." One of the friends asked how they met. Danny just said, "Long story." They went to dinner that night. Sandra, Danny, Lily, and Crank, at a pizza place that was too loud and too bright but felt exactly right. They ate and talked about normal things. School, work, plans for the future. It felt good. It felt like family. At the end of the night, Sandra walked Crank to his bike. "You didn't have to come all this way." "I wanted to." It meant a lot to Danny, to all of us. "It meant a lot to me, too." Sandra hesitated. Then she said, "You know you don't have to keep doing this alone. The quiet life, the solitude, you're allowed to let people in." Crank smiled. "I'm working on it." "Good." She hugged him, quick, warm, then stepped back. "Drive safe." "I will." Crank got on his bike and rode away. And for the first time in a long time, he did not feel like he was running from something. He felt like he was moving toward it. 3 years later, Danny turned 18. He called Crank the night before he graduated high school. "I wanted to tell you something," Danny said, "before I walk." "What's that?" "I've been thinking about that night a lot lately, about what you did, about the choice you made. It wasn't a choice, kid. It was the only thing I could do. Maybe. But it changed everything for me. It showed me what it looks like when someone puts someone else first, when they do the right thing, even when it costs them." Crank did not know what to say, so he just listened. "I'm enlisting," Danny said. "Army. I leave for basic in 2 months." "That's a big step." "I know, but it feels right. And I wanted you to know, because you're the reason I'm doing it. You showed me what it looks like to protect people, even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything." Crank's voice caught. "You're going to do great things, Danny." "I hope so. And when I do, I'm going to remember where I learned it." They talked for another hour about training, about what came next, about staying in touch. When they hung up, Crank sat in his apartment and let himself feel it. The pride, the gratitude, the sense that maybe, just maybe, he had done something right. 5 years after that, Crank got another call. This time it was Lily. She was 20 now, in college, studying social work. She wanted to meet. They met at the same diner where Crank had first met Sandra and Danny all those years ago. Lily was confident now, poised, strong, nothing like the terrified child in the trunk. "I don't remember that night," she said. "Not really. I have flashes, the dark, the tape, being scared, but nothing clear." "That's probably for the best." "Maybe, but Danny told me what you did, what you gave up, and I wanted to meet you, to say thank you. Even if I don't remember it, I know it matters." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do, because I'm alive because of you. I'm here, I'm safe, I get to have a life. And that's because you chose to help a couple of kids you didn't know." Crank looked at her, at this young woman who had survived something no child should have to survive. And he said, "You remind me of someone I lost a long time ago." "Your son?" "Yeah, he'd be about your age now, if he'd lived." "What was he like?" Crank smiled, sad but genuine. "Funny, brave. He loved dinosaurs, hated broccoli, had a gap in his teeth, and couldn't tie his shoes right." "He sounds wonderful." "He was. Lily reached across the table and took Crank's hand. I'm sorry you lost him, but I'm glad you were there for us. I think he'd be proud of you. Crank's throat tightened. He had to look away for a moment. Thank you. They sat there for a while, talking, sharing stories. Lily told him about school, about her plans to work with at-risk kids, about how that night, even though she did not remember, it had shaped who she became. When Lily left, she hugged him tight. You're part of our family now. You know that, right? I do. Good. Don't forget it. 10 years after that night in November, Crank stood in the parking lot of the tire shop that used to be the clubhouse. It was the anniversary. Like every year he had ridden out, parked the bike, sat in silence. But this year was different. This year someone else was there. Danny, in uniform, home on leave, 22 years old now. A man. He walked over to Crank's bike and stood there, waiting. Crank got off. They looked at each other. Thought I'd find you here, Danny said. How'd you know? Mom told me. She said you come here every year. Crank nodded. It's where it all changed. For all of us. They stood there, looking at the building, at the place where a scared kid had knocked on a steel door and changed the course of half a dozen lives. I never asked, Danny said. Do you regret it? What you gave up. Crank thought about it, about the years in prison, about the life he lost, about the club that fell apart, about the man he used to be and the man he became. No, he said finally, I don't regret it, not for a second. Even knowing what it cost you, especially knowing what it cost me, because it taught me something I'd forgotten, that doing the right thing is worth more than protecting yourself, and that some things are worth losing everything for. Danny nodded, quiet, thoughtful. Then he said, you want to get some coffee? There's a place down the road. We could sit, talk. Crank smiled. Yeah, I'd like that. They got on their bikes and rode, side by side, into the morning light. And for the first time in 20 years, Crank did not feel like he was carrying the weight alone. He had family now, not the one he was born into, not the one he lost, but the one he chose, the one that chose him back. And that was enough. The years passed. Crank kept working at the machine shop, kept living in the apartment above the diner, kept riding his bike on the anniversary. But now when he rode, he did not ride alone. Sometimes Danny came, sometimes Lily, sometimes Sandra. They made it a tradition, a way of remembering, a way of honoring what happened and what it meant. Danny served 2 tours overseas, came back with medals and scars and stories he did not talk about. Crank understood some things you carry alone, but Danny always called, always checked in, always made sure Crank knew he was not forgotten. Lily finished school, got a job working with foster kids, kids who had been through trauma, kids who needed someone to believe in them. She was good at it, natural. She told Crank once that she did it because someone had believed in her when it mattered most. Sandra remarried. A good man, a teacher, someone who treated her kids like they were his own. She sent Crank a photo from the wedding. Him and Sandra and Danny and Lily and the new husband all smiling on the steps of a church. Crank put it on his fridge, next to the photo of Michael. When Crank turned 70, they threw him a party. At the diner, nothing big, just Sandra and her family, Danny and his girlfriend, Lily and a few of her friends, the owner of the machine shop, a couple of guys Crank worked with. They ate cake, told stories, laughed, and for a few hours Crank forgot that he had ever been alone. At the end of the night, Danny stood up, raised a glass. To Crank, the man who taught me that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are. Everyone drank. Crank looked around the table, at these people who had become his family, at this life he had built from the ashes of the old one, and he felt something he had not felt in decades. Gratitude, pure and simple. 3 years later, Crank's health started to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age and hard living. His knees hurt, His back ached. He got tired more easily. The owner of the machine shop suggested he retire. Crank resisted at first, but eventually he agreed. He moved to a smaller place, one level, easier to manage. Sandra helped him pack. Danny and Lily helped him move. They set up his new apartment, hung pictures on the walls, made sure he had everything he needed. Crank tried to tell them they did not have to do this. They told him to shut up and let them help. He did. On quiet nights, Crank sat in his new apartment and thought about the arc of his life, about the choices he had made, about the people he had lost and the people he had found, about Michael and Danny and the strange symmetry of it all. He thought about the letter he had written in the clubhouse all those years ago, the one he had left on Michael's grave, and he wondered if his son would have been proud of the man he became. He hoped so. He could not know, but he hoped. One morning, Crank did not wake up. He died in his sleep, peaceful, no pain, just a quiet slipping away. The landlord found him 2 days later when he did not answer the door, called the police, called the number listed as his emergency contact, Sandra. She made the arrangements, planned the funeral, called everyone who needed to know. And 3 days later, they gathered at the cemetery outside the valley, the one where Michael was buried. Sandra, Danny, Lily, the owner of the machine shop, a few guys from work, Elena Foster, who had kept in touch over the years, and a handful of men who had once been iron serpents. Men who had scattered after the club fell apart, but who remembered Crank and what he had done. They buried him next to Michael, under the tree, in the plot Crank had purchased years ago but never told anyone about. Danny gave the eulogy. He stood at the front in uniform, his voice steady, and he talked about the night his sister was taken, about the walk through the dark, about knocking on a steel door and meeting a man who changed everything. He saved us, Danny said, not because he had to, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And he taught me that the measure of a man is not what he does when it's convenient. It's what he does when it costs him everything. Danny's voice broke. He had to stop, breathe. Then he continued. He lost his son, and he never forgave himself for not being there. But when I showed up at his door, he chose to be there. He chose us. And that choice saved our lives. It gave us a future. It gave me a father figure when I needed one most. He looked at the casket, at the flowers, at the 2 headstones side by side. He told me once that some things are worth losing everything for. I didn't understand it then, but I do now, because he lost everything to save us. And in doing so, he found something he thought he'd lost forever. He found redemption. He found peace. He found family. Danny stepped back. Lily came forward. She placed something on the casket, a pair of thick wool socks, the ones Crank had given Danny all those years ago, the ones Danny had kept in his closet for over 2 decades. He gave these to my brother when we needed them most, she said quietly. Now we're giving them back. They lowered the casket into the ground. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. And as the dirt fell, Sandra stood between her children and cried, not for loss, not anymore, but for gratitude, for the man who had saved them, for the life they had been given, for the family they had become. After everyone else left, Danny and Lily stayed. They stood at the grave, looking at the 2 headstones side by side, father and son, together again. Do you think he's at peace now? Lily asked. Yeah, Danny said. I think he is. They stood there until the sun went down. Then they walked away, together, a family forged not by blood but by choice, by sacrifice, by love. And in the quiet of that cemetery under the tree, 2 graves sat side by side. One marked the life of a boy who died too young. The other marked the life of a man who spent his final years trying to make up for it. Some people say redemption is impossible, that you cannot undo the past, that mistakes are permanent. But standing there looking at those graves, it was hard not to believe that sometimes in the right moment, with the right choice, a man can find his way back. can become the person he was always meant to be, and that is worth everything. Years later, on a cold November morning, a woman in her 30s walked into a tire shop in the Central Valley. She was with her son, a boy about 8 years old. Boom. They asked if they could look around. The owner said sure. The woman walked through the building, touching the walls, looking at where things used to be. The boy did not understand. He asked his mother what they were doing here. "This is where your grandfather saved my life," she said. "A long time ago, before you were born." "How?" "He chose to be there when it mattered. He gave up everything to do the right thing. And because of him, I'm here. And because I'm here, you're here." The boy thought about that. Was he a good man? The woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "He was the best man I ever knew." She took her son's hand, and they walked out into the morning light, into a world made possible by a choice, by a sacrifice, by a man who learned in the end what it means to be there. And somewhere in a cemetery under a tree, two souls rested side by side. The weight finally lifted, the debt finally paid, peace at last.